Alright, man, peace. So brothers, in this video I definitely want to touch on and address some of the components that I see in the tragic death, the murder of this young man from the Bronx by the name of LeSandro Guzman-Feliz. And let me take you brothers back a couple of months. First off, in February I did a series of videos detailing the true origins of St. Valentine's Day. I stated that St. Valentine's Day was known in the ancient world as the Lupercalia, meaning the veneration of the wolf aspect of the god Apollo and also the god Pan. And on that day in the ancient world, you had to perform a ritual sacrifice of a child. And I stated that you're going to see a multitude of very strange murders, i.e. sacrifices, occur from the Lupercalia in mid-February all the way through the summer solstice, culminating normally during the time period that we call the month of July, i.e. Independence Day, quote unquote, on July 4th, as well as July 20th, which is known as the Heliacal Rising, which is the reemergence of the star known as the Sirius or Sirius star, which is representative of the mother goddess in the ancient Babylonian mystery school system. The Sirius star rises in accord with the sun representing her son Heru, she representing Aset or Isis. That is what the twin suns in the Star Wars film represent. Remember when Luke was on Tatooine and he was looking out over the horizon and the two suns were rising? That represents the Sirius star as well as the sun. Just to get back to the point, I stated that you're going to see a great amount of very strange murders occur. And normally, when you see murders that get publicized all across the country, if not all across the world, they're normally ritualistic. And that is what clearly occurred to me in the death of Mr. LeSandro Guzman-Feliz, aka Junior. Let me say this first off. I was born and raised in the Bronx. I've seen a lot of wild shit, but I'm not quite sure if I've ever seen anything quite that gruesome. I saw the video footage of it a couple of Fridays ago. Someone that I know showed me the video, also showed me the sex video that allegedly precipitated his murder, allegedly. And when I was watching the video of him getting killed and stabbed up, I had to turn away for a moment. But in the aftermath of just watching how many of these issues have transpired in regards to his case, it became more and more apparent to me that he was ritualistically sacrificed. But I want to cover this case from a couple of angles, not just the spiritual angle, but also just from a basic societal perspective, because I just see a lot of nonsense that goes on in the so-called black community, so-called people of color community, including the so-called Hispanic community, that is very pervasive and very hypocritical. And that's what leads to unfortunate incidents just in our everyday lives in regards to these murders that occur. Well, anyway, they're going to talk about it and I'm going to chime in.
First, another arrest. 8 people now facing charges in the stabbing death of an innocent teen. Tonight, tributes in the form of flowers and marches in the street show a community fighting for justice.
Let me say this very quickly. It's very common in the so-called black and Hispanic community for us to show far greater respect for the dead than we do for the living. That is one of the main Achilles heels that exists in the so-called black and Hispanic community, that we're so respectful of the dead and oftentimes nowhere near as respectful towards the living in our own society, in our own communities, so-called communities.
Good evening, I'm Maurice Dubois.
And I'm Christine Johnson. CBS 2's Valerie Castro has more now from the Belmont section of the Bronx. Valerie?
Christine and Maurice, tonight the calls for justice for Junior have been nonstop here outside the bodega where he was killed, and some are even suggesting that the street be renamed Justice for Junior Way in memory.
Why would you name that street Justice for Junior Way? That does not even make any sense. But once again, that's indicative of the infatuation that our people have with commemorating death and violence. For the most part, our people are so discombobulated spiritually that they don't even have the foggiest idea of what justice actually is. Justice is how you're going to treat these young boys that are still alive, as opposed to infatuating over and deifying a young man who is gone and is not coming back. But once again, that is part of this ritual.
Memory of the 15-year-old who became the innocent victim of gang violence. A large crowd.
I hope all those brothers that are clasping arms and talking about justice for Junior, I hope that they called their son this morning. I hope that they spoke to their son. I hope that they're focusing on having something to teach their sons that are still here and alive on the earth, as opposed to trying to participate in a spectacle over a young man who's gone. I'm not saying to forget about him. I'm saying that we have to understand and differentiate between the living and the dead, and how important it is to make sure that we treat one another while we're alive as well as we treat the dead, or as well as we act like we want to treat the dead. So-called blacks and Hispanics are very fond of saying to not speak ill of the dead, but then the next word out of their mouth is how much they're going to speak ill of the living.
Crowd made its way up 183rd Street in the Belmont section of the Bronx, walking the same path 15-year-old LeSandro Guzman-Feliz took last Wednesday after he was stabbed. It was a case of mistaken identity by alleged Trinitarios gang members.
Let me say this very quickly. The narrative surrounding the death of that young man is that it was a case of quote-unquote mistaken identity. I'm not quite sure if I buy that fully. He may have been at the wrong place at the wrong time, quote-unquote, but I have little doubt that he was lured out of his apartment by some of the members of that gang. It would not surprise me at all if they knew him, or were at the very least very familiar with him as an associate of someone. I'm not saying that he's the person that they were targeting. I'm pretty sure that, as the story relates, that it was a case of mistaken identity. But there's certainly, in my view, far more than meets the eye in regards to what occurred that night on June 20th. I personally believe that he was set up. I myself have very little doubt that this was a ritual, and that none of the parties involved were quite aware to what extent they were playing a role in this ritual. Mr. Guzman-Feliz was 15 years old. What exactly was he doing out in the street at 11:45 at night approximately on a school night? On, I believe it was a Wednesday night. Why was he lured downstairs? Why is no one focusing on some of these facts of the case? Everyone wants to get caught up in the emotional aspect of it. I'm sorry, but you're not going to tell me that there were 2 getaway vehicles at the very least, and these people just happened to come across someone who they feel like fit the description of a person that had made a sex tape with the sister of one of the gang members of the Trinitarios gang. I'm just not buying it. It's very clear that Mr. Guzman-Feliz was targeted by someone, maybe not the gang per se, but he was meant to play a certain role in this ritual, and there was no way that he was going to be allowed to escape alive. Let me just be a little bit more plain about it. For many of you brothers who are familiar with the scriptures, you know about the entity known as Tammuz. When you read Ezekiel, the 8th chapter, it tells you about the women who are weeping for Tammuz. As I stated in the opening of this video, there are going to be a lot of ritualistic sacrifices and murders that occur between the time period of the Lupercalia, or what we call St. Valentine's Day, all the way through the summer solstice, culminating on July 4th into July 20th, the Heliacal Rising. The month of July is known in the Near Eastern cultures as Tammuz. Why is that? Because Tammuz was ritualistically murdered on June 20th, on the eve of the summer solstice, or what's known as the new moon of the summer solstice. Tammuz, aka Bacchus or Osiris, was murdered by being stabbed and cut up in pieces by the Titans. This is why I state that without a doubt, to me, this story has a ritualistic aspect to it. The Titans, for those of you who are familiar with the story, are proverbial demons that were called up from hell, or Tartarus as the story goes, to slaughter Bacchus or slaughter Tammuz, whatever you want to call him. He was also known in the Sumerian culture as Dumuzid, spelled D as in David, Umuzid. And this murder always ritually occurred on June 20th, right on the eve of the summer solstice, to act as a sacrifice for that time period during the summer where the sun of the mother goddess, would disappear because he was killed. That is why the women weep. Pay very close attention to what the newscast concentrates on as we go through this video.
Seeking revenge. Guzman-Feliz tried to run to St. Barnabas Hospital a block away, but died just short of reaching the emergency room.
I need to know who this friend was that called him downstairs saying that he needed some money. And why was he going downstairs at 15 years old at 11:45 p.m. at night on a school night to deliver some money to a friend? For those of us who are from the hood, and if you ran the street at one time, or you had a family member who ran the street, what would you always say, or what would that family member always say when they wanted to go outside at a strange hour of the night? Oh, I have to go outside. I'm hungry. I want to buy a bag of chips. Oh, I owe my homeboy $2. I'll be right back. And then not come back for 2 or 3 hours. That's what street kids do. By no means am I trying to diminish the horrific death that Mr. Guzman-Feliz suffered, but there's certainly more than meets the eye to this story, to me.
What happened to this young man should have never happened.
And I'm sure that all you brothers that are watching this video can see that on the right-hand side, there's the West Indian brother with the Masonic chain on his neck.
So we're going to take this walk. We're going to walk for Junior.
All those people are weeping for Tammuz.
This showing unity. It's showing as a community that everybody...
Please understand that Tammuz or Dumuzid was recognized as a god of vegetation. He was ritualistically murdered and then he was reborn.
Everybody can come together and try to change something because these kids are going outside and they can't even be safe.
Another show of unity at the funeral home where a wake was held for a second day.
Yes, weeping for Tammuz.
The teen's mother arrived wearing black. The crowd gave her a bouquet of white flowers before she went inside. Mayor de Blasio arrived later in the evening, greeted by young NYPD explorers. This woman painted a picture of Guzman-Feliz, a gesture she hopes brings healing to the community.
I felt so hurt, and I only could imagine how the rest of the world feels seeing.
Yes, very strange that this was broadcast out to the world. That's how you know that it was a ritualistic murder. By no means, once again, am I trying to be quote-unquote insensitive to what is occurring, but this is a pro-truth channel. And the things that I state are meant to help brothers in understanding what is actually going on around them. But just to get back to the point and to speak on a basic level, I hope that Miss Tiffany Alfonseca is as sensitive to her own children, if she has some, or to the children who are still alive, as she is towards a young boy who is dead, who is in the spirit world awaiting his judgment. We have to understand that. Once we're gone, we're gone. Our people have an infatuation with the dead.
Seeing it like so brutal and out in the public.
As for the investigation, an 8th arrest was announced.
By the name of Alvin Garcia.
Garcia was escorted from the 48th precinct Tuesday night. His hand appeared to be wrapped in a bandage, but it's unclear how he was injured. 6 other men faced a judge in Paterson, New Jersey, and
those are the Titans.
And waived extradition. Last night, 19-year-old Kevin Alvarez made his first appearance on charges including second-degree murder. Back at the bodega where the murder took place,
the use of the candle in veneration of the dead once again goes back to the commemoration of the death of Tammuz, the son of the mother goddess. That's all it's about. The name Tammuz literally means purified by fire. The son of the mother goddess and also the father of the sun will always align with the actual sun in the sky, the S-U-N in the sky. And as a microcosmic veneration of them, that is where the use of the candle and the light of the candle came to represent them and their death and the hoped for resurrection. So that's why you oftentimes see the use of the candle like in the Catholic Church. Also the Buddhist monks, they use the candle for ritualistic processions. Of course, in your everyday life, you can use candles for lighting your house and things of that nature. But I'm just talking about from the spiritual aspect. That's where the use of the candle comes from, in accord with remembrance for the dead.
Have overcome the street corner as tributes continue to pour in, like these T-shirts made by the young friends who knew Guzman-Feliz best.
All that is in commemoration of proverbial Tammuz. People get killed out here on the street every day. But for some reason, they decided to push this story and propagate this story all across the world. Because once again, there is no doubt in my mind that this was a ritualistic killing. And I'm going to guess that there are going to be some tidbits that are going to come out about this case when they finally get a chance to interview the Titans, i.e. the Trinitarios gang that murdered him.
Funeral services are scheduled to take place tomorrow. In the Belmont section of the Bronx, Valerie Castro, CBS 2 News.
Now, as people in Belmont demand justice for Junior, they also want to know what happened inside that deli and whether anyone tried to save him. CBS 2's Ali Bauman has more on this.
I hope that all the people all over the internet that are acting so overly concerned with how much help Mr. Guzman-Feliz received or did not receive are going to hold themselves to the same standards the next time they see someone who needs assistance, or the next time that they're on World Star Hip Hop or some other media website watching someone get their ass whooped. There was recently a story where there were a couple of men who were filming a couple of other men drowning. I believe it was at Niagara Falls. And nobody is asking for them to be incarcerated. The owner of that store was confronted with a situation that I hope that no one else is ever confronted with.
The shutters are locked around the deli on East 183rd Street, where the 15-year-old boy known as Junior was dragged out the door by alleged gang members last Wednesday night. Tonight, many in the neighborhood blame the owner, who they say should have done more to help Junior.
Yes, because we know that in the so-called Black and Hispanic community, what oftentimes is encouraged amongst our people is to get involved in stopping crimes. Yeah. It's not like there was ever a campaign to stop snitching, quote unquote, just a few years ago in the so-called Black and Hispanic community. We know that we have nothing to do with encouraging criminality in our own community. So we should accept a grocery store owner to act like Charles Bronson and get in the midst of 6 machete-wielding gang members to stop a young boy from getting killed. Footage has already revealed that he tried to hide him.
Before he was stabbed repeatedly.
You know, people are so phony, man.
You denying him. You threw him out twice.
If you see the video, he didn't care about that kid to be helped.
You don't let no baby come to you crying for your help and you don't help them.
City Council.
More weeping for Tammuz. I hope that many of these liberal, so-called Black and Hispanic females feel as much mercy for children when they're thinking about getting an abortion.
City Councilman Richie Torres wants the city to shut this deli down for good, claiming its owner turned a blind eye.
I specifically asked the NYPD whether he called 911, and the NYPD said no.
But the NYPD chief of department refuted that claim today.
There were calls from the bodega owner or the bodega workers on this particular incident to send help.
We asked workers at several small businesses nearby what it's like to work on this block overnight.
It's not really safe. Like, we have to be careful in the nighttime.
All of them told
We all have to be careful in the nighttime and the daytime.
Told us they can't blame that deli worker for protecting himself and hope he really did call 911.
I don't know how he felt. What was he feeling? Was he fearing for himself?
It's hard to blame him for what he did, but...
No one who is reasonable is going to blame the deli owner for what occurred that night. Only people who have been overly emotionally manipulated by the media. People who are hypocrites and who themselves oftentimes will not get involved when other people need help.
But we just don't know what we'll do in that situation unless we're in it.
Some local leaders say businesses should be safe havens.
That if anybody runs inside their shop, they provide safety for them.
Oh, good. So that means that every business in the so-called Black and Hispanic community should now be considered a halfway house. No problem.
Sources say police were called here for an assault in progress, but by the time officers arrived, the victim was already gone. We've been trying to find the deli owner to hear his side of all this, but so far we haven't been able to reach him.
That deli owner, if he's smart, he's not going to come back there. Because all of these people who supposedly are such advocates of nonviolence and helping out those in time of need are going to be looking to commit acts of violence against him if he should show his face again.
From the Belmont section of the Bronx, Allie Bauman, CBS 2 News.
But anyway, I'm going to pick this up on part 2. Peace.